So welcome everyone. Going to just take a couple of minutes for people to stream in. We still have people joining us today, so welcome. We'll just have a moment of silence while we wait for everybody to join. All right, thanks. Let's get started. So nice to have you all with us today. My name's Bruce Hamilton. I work with some of the other folks on our panel today, Larry Anderson and Melinda Manette. Happy to be with you all to introduce a friend and colleague of ours, Scott Galvin, who is the co-creator of the Respect for People roadmap, and that's what we'll be talking about today. I'm really excited about it myself. In the course, enjoying it. Culture is extremely important to me and to GBMP. A big part of the Shingo model as well. I'm wearing my Shingo shirt because I feel the vibes are there for culture today. We've asked Scott if he could share with us, and in a very short period of time, the basic idea behind the Respect for People roadmap. I also want to mention before we begin that Scott is also now best-selling author of Leading with Compassion, Connecting from the Inside Out, available on Amazon. But today we'll just be talking about respect for people. Scott, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
All right. Well, thank you, Bruce, and thank you for having me here. It's also been great to have you in the program. So, just a little background about myself. I've been an operations consultant for um, almost 30 years now, and so have been on the continuous improvement side, and then eventually came to the respect for people side. Today I'm going to be talking about really the impact that culture has on performance, and specifically why focusing on just the process side alone as a means to making progress or making improvement is really not enough. We'll also cover a little bit of the hidden barriers to execution, and then give you a little bit of the framework that we've kind of looked at for driving culture change or this culture transformation that we often talk about when we're doing lean. Um, to kind of baseline us, we know that strategy and execution are how we create, deliver, and capture value in our business. But it's really the organizational culture is what connects them and brings them together as a system. And so organizational culture, just to kind of baseline us on what do we mean by that, is really refers to kind of those shared values, those beliefs, the norms and practices that shape the behaviors and attitudes of everyone within the organization. And another way that I sometimes refer to it is it's our collective personality of the organization. And it includes the ways in which employees interact, communicate, make decisions, approach, and perform their work. But whatever the objective, culture and interpersonal behaviors play a really significant role in the implementation and success of any change effort, whether it's lean or something else. But before we get into it, I'm interested in what brings the people who are here, what brings them to this webinar, and what are some of the cultural challenges that their organization is trying to overcome. And you can drop them into the chat, and we'll kind of pick up a few of those. If you want to just drop in the chat, what are some of the cultural challenges your organization is trying to overcome? And while we're collecting up some of those, I'll share with you one that often comes up: communication. That almost doesn't matter what organization I go to. Communication challenges seem to always be somewhere in the top of the list. Not only do we see a variety of different styles between direct and indirect, but some cultures prefer people to be a little more straightforward, while others are rely on more context and nuance. And so, because of that, there's can be quite a difference between how people communicate. Um, and I'm going to look at the chat over here on the side here. Wow, a whole bunch. Uh, Getting past the skeptics, the firefighting that you have to do every day. Oh yeah, multiple shifts. That's always a challenge. Creating that ownership and trying to overcome that blame game is another one that I see. Yeah, communication engagement. Um, if you've got an acquisition, that creates challenges. Yeah, trust and authenticity. A whole bunch of good ones here. Great. Well, thank you for that. Um, so interestingly, a lot of these challenges are fixable, aren't fixable with just process alone. I know I've tried to do it myself, and I have not been successful yet by using just process. I was, and hopefully I still am, highly effective at process optimization. And so, helping the clients that I work with improve process. But I didn't always get the results that I was hoping for. So I started thinking about, well, what am I doing wrong? Why am I not getting the results every time? And it was really in that curiosity that led me to kind of explore what was missing, or what was I doing wrong, or what could I be doing different. And so, despite the fact that I'm, you know, part of this webinar, you might be surprised to learn that culture was not always on my radar. In fact, for the first few years of kind of my lean journey, I didn't even really think about culture much. And as a consultant, my work has largely focused on just the performance piece. And so for maybe the first 10 years, I attempted to what I can now reflect on as strong arming process change. And I thought, hey, I can do this. I've got a solid business case. I've got all the reasons why we need to do this. We've got that platform that is maybe even burning, and so we've got a lot of justification. Except that in that environment, we weren't. It just wasn't sticking. I'd come back 6 months later, and things would have unraveled on me. And as many of you know, process outlines how the work should get done, but it is really behavior. Is how it actually gets done, and it's what really is driving us to have sustainable processes. So I started to come to learn that it's about behavior, not just process. And so at some point in my career, I came across this quote: "First we build people, then we build cars," by Fujio Cho. And at the time, my understanding around driving performance was really, I looked at Toyota and said, okay, so they're very successful. It's because they're doing this continuous improvement thing, and they're driving process improvement. And my boss back then was laser focused on just getting the results. And CI was all about optimizing that business performance, making, the shipments on time, hitting those numbers, getting the efficiency of the process up and running. But the emphasis wasn't really on developing people. It wasn't about improving the work environment or fostering collaboration. It was really all about output and results in numbers. At the same time, I started to dive a little deeper into the lean literature and studying the Toyota methods and trying to understand what made them so successful. And it, and really, the truth was staring me right in the face. I mean, Toyota has shared it many times. I remember going on a tour, and there was a Toyota sensei there who said, you're taking all these pictures, you're not going to see it. And I said, yeah, yeah, okay. And I kept taking pictures. And so, the key to sustainable performance wasn't just the process or the metrics. It really was the culture and the behaviors. And ironically, the very source that I looked to for guidance really had already embedded this into their philosophy. I wasn't connecting the dots. And so to show you what I mean, I want to do a little quick exercise with you. And so I'm going to show you a picture, and I want you to tell me you can drop it in the chat. What's the first word that you think of when you see this image? So you can get ready in your chat here. Drop your responses in the chat. We'll see how you respond to this picture. What's the first word? Don't think about it. Just your kind of visceral response. Um, see what words we come up. Uphill road. Yeah. Obstacle detail. Bump in the road. Lazy. Yeah. Not my job. Lazy. Not my job. Yeah. Those are mistake. Those are often the typical reactions that we get. In fact, lazy is probably the number one word that comes up when I show this picture. But what if I told you that prior to that incident, John was considered a high performer, and the morning that he painted that line, his boss came to him and gave him an ultimatum, said, "Hey, listen, I'm getting pressure from corporate. You need to hit your mileage quota, and if you can't hit your mileage quota, then you might be looking for a new job." And so, with that context, you might see that white line just a little differently. John was under this pressure to make his mileage quota, and the system really wasn't considering the obstacles that he was running into to get that mileage quota. And so, as John's story kind of demonstrates it's not enough to just look at the white line and how he painted it or the work that he did or how he was trained even not even about his discipline because prior to him painting that white line he was considered the best performer on his crew. You have to really look at the cultural conditions that led to the painting of that white line and the barriers to the execution or the cultural bottlenecks that impacted how the work actually got done. And that's kind of what we want to dig into a little bit. So you can tell a lot about an organization's culture through the kind of the conditions that they have. So those norms, those values, those attitudes, the practices, the behaviors that really define what is that working environment for that organization. And you can tell a lot about the organization's cultural conditions by looking at how the organization responds to internal and external challenges. And so, just to kind of give you an example here, how employees interact and the way that work is performed also gives you kind of a understanding of the cultural underpinnings in play. As the line in the road kind of example shows, there's a feedback loop between individual behavior and culture. And so there's this bi-directional loop that happens. So the way an individual behaves then affects kind of the culture, and then the culture kind of then influences the individual as well. So there's this, in the social learning theory suggests that individuals learn behaviors or the values or those norms or those standards for that organization by observing others. So in an organizational context, employees observe and imitate the behaviors modeled by their leaders, by their peers. And that leads to the adoption of whatever these shared behaviors across the organization are. And so when there's a negative feedback into that loop, then you start to see kind of negative elements of a culture. But to counteract that, you need to infuse a positive feedback loop. So if you start infusing positive elements of positive behaviors, then you can start to influence that culture in a positive way as well. So this means that people aren't going to stop and address the quality if they're measured on completion. So just like John, his measurement was get the mileage, not necessarily on the quality of the work. And so you won't you won't be able to troubleshoot that in an efficient way if you have the wrong systems in place. And then, the employees aren't going to challenge any misguided or incomplete solutions if no one else is speaking up or no one else is supporting them. And so it's really about looking at the cultural conditions and the systems that employees are working in order to help them troubleshoot that or to overcome those obstacles, those white lines. And ultimately, they'll resist change if they don't believe their ideas are valued. If we don't feel seen, heard, and valued, we tend to not engage or contribute. And engagement, as we know, has been going down year over year for several years now. And so, how often do you hear some of these statements? No one listens to us anyway. I just do what I'm told. That's above my pay grade. Why bother? Nothing ever changes here. And I even saw it in some of the text that you dropped in thing. It's not my job. That's how we've always done it. So these are just some of the comments that you might hear. And when you hear these, then you know that you've got a white line that needs to be addressed. Um, Maybe we want to see if Larry or Bruce or even Melinda, any other things you want to share on that?
I think we're all waiting for the other to speak, so I'll speak first. Yeah, this is really central to everything that we do in our work. The technical part of improvement is certainly important, but ultimately it's the environment which matters, and the environment is a sum over all those cultures. All those the things that you mentioned on this slide here are things that we've all heard, and it's frustrating for everyone. It's like we're all caught in this mire that prevents us from being the best we can be. So focusing on culture, that's what's exciting to me about this is we're really hitting the the most essential part of this. And it's a shame that after all this time, it was kind of right there, as you say, Scott, in front of us.
Mhm.
But it's never too late, never too late. So happy for the product.
And these comments are not unique to a particular organization or a particular problem that's trying to be solved. And so we know that when we come together to solve problems every day, everywhere, that once we can speak together and overcome some of these initial reactions, magic happens. And it's
Mhm.
really great to see.
Yeah,
And
excellent.
I'll
All right.
just reflect on a similar journey that Scott talked about from the technical side to the cultural side. He referred 30 years. I think I'm probably a few more than that. But the thing that this particular material, the roadmap did for me was provide a lot of context for things that had been accumulated over a number of years, right? So most of us have probably been through workshops where we've tried to have good team performance and we've looked at people's characteristics, Myers-Briggs, and then other kinds of things that we've looked at. This material for me has provided a lot of context of how all those things fit together to help create a culture.
Yeah. Thank you, Larry. Thank you, guys. Um, so, a lot of those statements are exactly what behavior has to do with lean. In fact, they often either motivate us or, in some cases, maybe demotivate us to implement the continuous improvement pillar of the Toyota way, when they should really motivate us to focus on kind of the respect for people side. It's really the lesser known, but it's really the is just as equally important part of kind of the model that we've been working from. And so, we often spend most of our time on that continuous improvement side. And we might give lip service to the respect for people side. And so I don't know if Larry or Bruce or Melinda, you want to kind of share your experience of kind of the balancing of these two.
Well, I'll just say I think they're two sides of the same coin. I think if you're not giving people a professional challenge in their work, you're not respecting them, and if people are not able to work together, they're basically working against each other. So a lot of this is so much common sense. Even though there's two pillars, absolutely, but in my mind, it's hard to think of. For example, Kaizen is about process improvement to make improvements for the customer, say, but it's also about human development. It's also about individuals getting better at what they do and having more people, more and more problem solvers, and that's exciting to people. It's just something which is natural to people that unfortunately we maybe squashed out. And so this idea brings that back. The respect for people reminds us what we maybe the missing ingredient.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I guess I'd like to say that the pictures we draw for ourselves to be able to understand things are sometimes create interesting perspectives. So if you look at the bottom left, when we're going to where the work is done, we can do that in a respectful way, or we can do it in a way that doesn't show respect for the individuals that are actually doing the work. So all of these are interconnected and interdependent, and it's sometimes hard to see when you have to draw a picture of it that that's the case. And so again, I think as Bruce is pointing out, if we're not demonstrating respect when we implement our continuous improvement plans, when we issue our challenges, it has a negative impact on the culture and can create results that are less than what we would like to have.
And that's why at the end of the day, if we don't address the right-hand side of this graphic head on, we are not going to be successful. It will become a bottleneck to our implementation.
Yeah, and I just saw that Bob said, continuous improvement is 10%, and the tools are 10%, and 90% is about the people. And I think part of the challenge that I've observed, and I'll get into this a little bit in a few minutes, but there is a difference between respecting people and respect for people. And it just occurred to me now as I'm looking at this that respect is a component of respect for people. It's under that pillar. It's an element of that. Respecting people is often limited to kind of our individual actions, like, being polite, being kind. Um, it tends to be situational, and it tends to be reactive, and so it varies across the context and the individual people. It tends to be more kind of personal behaviors. As a result, they tend to be more short-term and kind of surface level interactions. Whereas respect for people is really designed to be organization-wide. It's really encompassing kind of the systems, the policies, the processes that where respect is embedded into those and into the culture and into the practice. It's about being more proactive and intentional, fostering kind of consistency across all levels of the organization. And it is something that is more fully adopted. So it's not relying on kind of the individual adoption, but it's a proactive practice to have it fully adopted so that it's part of the structures and cultural norms in the daily operations. And so as a result of that, instead of it being short term and kind of surface level, it becomes more deep and lasting, where it really creates a more meaningful cultural and operational change across the whole organization. Um, and so again, I came to this epiphany that, hey, it seems like we're doing a lot on it's almost the opposite of what Bob just shared. It feels like I was doing 90% continuous improvement and maybe 10% respect for people. And so how do you flip that equation? Well, so what I had to do was really kind of go back and kind of decode what is it that organizations that seem to be doing a really great job with respect for people, what is it that they're doing? So and because I was struggling to sustain it, I really started to think about that second pillar, the respect of people. And so, in my efforts to decode it, I observed three things, and this was after many conversations with hundreds of Toyota people and other organizations that I think were doing a really good job on the respect for people side. And there were three themes that started to kind of emerge for me. The first was that the people in those organizations, they see behaviors more objectively. So they were just a lot more objective about those white lines that they were seeing. When they would see someone paint a white line, they were just a lot more objective about it. The second was that they value the entirety of a person's experience. And so not just kind of the experience of maybe their role, but their whole life experience and maybe even the things outside of work that they were doing. And then third, they were really good at connecting people to this collective wisdom for really this mutual benefit. And I realized that these were the cultural conditions that I saw that were missing um, in my own practice, but in the practice of some of the organizations that I was working with as well. And so I started to take those. And so in applying kind of that insight that I had, and so I took kind of that objectiveness that I saw that these organizations were doing, like Toyota, and I started to compare that to, okay, well, what is it that I'm doing, or what is it that my client organizations are doing? And so, we were not objective, but we were just more reactive. We would often jump to action without really knowing the full extent of the problem or understanding the context or really just having a good understanding of what was going on. So when I saw that white line, I jumped to that conclusion, oh, it's because that guy's lazy, without really knowing kind of the backstory of what was going on there. And then the second thing was that they really valued technical skills and status kind of overall versus the overall experience of a person. So there was an example I was asking someone, I said, so why did you include Maria on your team? And they said, well, Maria's traveled to like almost 30 different countries. She must have knowledge and experience of, all of these different cultures. And maybe she knows something in there that could impact how we're trying to address this problem. She had nothing to do with that area of the business or that problem, but they included her because she just had this broader experience that none of them had. And then the third thing was that they often turn to kind of the usual suspects instead of really actively seeking kind of getting a diverse group of people together with diverse opinions and diverse ideas. It's a quality issue. Okay, let's call Bob from quality and get him and his team to fix it, as opposed to kind of bringing together that diversity of people. So I kind of took those and I said, okay, well, what would that look like? And so I started to make a model by reverse engineering kind of what I saw that was missing and what I saw that, and I saw those hallmarks of the Toyota culture. And so what I came away with was I took those three things and I said, well, how do I make a model that's more actionable? And so seeing behaviors more objectively became engaging with compassion. So I wanted to help organizations and show them how can you engage with compassion so that you can see behaviors more objectively. The second one was taking that valuing the entire person experience. That became treating people like they matter. And then the third one was taking that collective wisdom, and that became partnering for mutual benefit. So could I teach people how to partner better for this shared benefit? And so just to kind of dig into those a little bit, and I'll let maybe Bruce in a second here share kind of his experience of going through the program around this particular principle. But every organization wants their people to better see and solve problems, but in order to solve the right problems in the right way, that requires us to have bigger picture thinking versus just jumping to these conclusions that we kind of naturally do. And so that first principle, engage with compassion, is really about reminding us to look beyond those white lines, that surface appearance, or what seem like the obvious behaviors, to consider more of the context of what's going on for those people and the actions. And so the goal of engaging with compassion is to move from being reactive to more reflective by really learning to recognize and diffuse our own judgments that are so natural to us that skew our decision making and that maybe strain team dynamics and really maybe put a strain on those workplace relationships. And so, Bruce, I know you're in the middle of the program, but I know that you've come through this part of it. Anything you want to share on that?
Yeah, this was great, and it was great not only for personal reflection, Scott, but there's other folks in the class. Some of them are my team members, and we're getting to know each other a little better through this process, I'll say. Even though I feel like maybe we work together pretty closely, this is an immersive experience where we're learning more about ourselves, kind of in a position where you have to take a look in the mirror. So that's really important. But also then getting perspectives from persons that we don't know at all. Just went through an exercise yesterday with somebody who I met for the first time, and we were practicing trying to understand each other better, to dig deeper, to know what's beyond, just the name and the title. We're all kind of slaves to roles that we're in.
Mhm.
And we make judgments. We feel like we're responsible for things that maybe we should be sharing. Managers struggle to let go, and then they wonder why people don't participate. So the whole topic of engaging with compassion creates an environment where we can reflect on creating better condition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've been through the materials also for everybody's benefit here. So this particular one is like, where do I start? And if you're engaging with compassion, you're, at least for me, starting at a point saying, well, I wonder how this could have happened, as opposed to making judgments about how it did happen.
Yeah.
And to me, that's kind of a shift that would be valuable, I think, for everybody. And because depending upon the circumstance, I think we all jump to conclusions. There may be things where we're much more objective. Maybe when it gets a little more personal, we jump to conclusions a little faster.
Mm.
So being conscious of having compassion for others when we start into a problem-solving process was actually very beneficial, enlightening.
Mhm. And I will just say, I know compassion is kind of one of those words you kind of look a little maybe sideways, like "Okay, compassion. We're going to talk about this really in the workplace, and really, if you think about what lean is about, lean is about identifying a problem, identifying a waste, identifying a pain point, and then helping to alleviate that. And that's exactly the definition of compassion. Compassion is identifying pain and helping alleviate that pain. And so it just fits so perfectly. And it was, I didn't want to use the word compassion, but it just, because of what it is, it fits so perfectly for what lean is. That I kept coming back to it. And so that's why we talk about engaging with compassion. Let me move on to the next one, which is treat people like they matter. And this is really about the power of being seen. And so, sometimes we can mistakenly believe that capability or competence is directly tied to someone's status or their title. Um, And this can lead us to overlook the impact of other people's life experiences or maybe their non-technical abilities, and particularly for those who might be in less prominent positions, especially our frontline coworkers. And as a result, talent and expertise can be underutilized. Our eighth waste, depending on kind of how you look at the different wastes. And so we miss out on seeing and building on those valuable resources we have in each other. And so the goal of treating people like they matter is really to help individuals transition from this indifference to this inclusion by teaching them to kind of recalibrate their perception of who and what is valuable and who is qualified to really solve problems and where those ideas can come from sometimes. And so I'll open it up to the others here. Anything you want to share about your experience of going through treat people like they matter.
Yeah, I'll speak again. Someone earlier in the chat talked about the differential between first shift and second shift, and I think
Mm,
that that's a place where observation would say, second shift sometimes just the nature of the way that the organization is set up and the way it's talked about creates a circumstance where it's not as a fun place to work on second shift, for instance. And so again, this is a mindset of where we start. And the materials help us with tools and ways to self-reflect so that we can look and say, do I really think that these people matter or not? So I can start with a place that says, I can look for opportunities for them to make a contribution where otherwise I may not look for.
mhm,
Because there's lots of statements in organizations about people being the most important thing, but when you look at it from a cultural standpoint, there's all these signals that says maybe not so much.
mhm,
And you've mentioned, Scott, the organization structure, the assumption about what people know or don't know based on where they are in the organization. Uh,
mhm,
the materials allow us to challenge ourselves in our thinking about that.
mhm. Yeah, I remember working in an organization once, and it was pretty early in the engagement. And I was talking to someone on in the shop, and I said, "Hey, what is that guy's name?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't know. We call him the new guy." I was like, "You don't even know his name?" He's like, "No, no, we don't bother learning people's names until they've been here for like at least 6 months." And I said, "Well, that kind of explains why you have 40% turnover."
Mhm.
We all want to feel seen, heard, and valued. And if you don't treat everybody like they matter, then, they're gonna kind of vote with their shoes, right? So,
And Scott, I remember in this particular module having a conversation with someone who I had not met before. And the way that you guided us with that guided conversation, after just an hour or even less, I knew more about that person than I knew about the people that I've worked with for 30 years.
mhm.
And so it just raised this awareness that treating people like they matter means really knowing them and what
Yeah,
a difference that can make in terms of our ability to collaborate.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's easy to take people for granted, Scott.
Mhm,
Something that I've been reflecting on. I think maybe they they think I like them, or so I just think about it, but I never let them know. Not enough, and so sometimes an action like that m makes people feel like they're taken for granted, and that's disrespectful.
yeah, yeah. Thank you. Well, thank you, all of you, for those. Let me move on to the third principle here, which is partnering for mutual benefit. And we use the word partnering very intentionally because if you think about, we didn't say teaming for mutual benefit. We said partnering because a partner is someone who, there is this connection that is deeper than just what you might have with a teammate. And so partnering for mutual benefit is how teams really work their way up to what we think of as innovation. We hear all the time, well, we need to be more innovative, we need to be more creative. But the way that we communicate, what we share, and how open we are to those new perspectives not only shapes kind of our individual effort, but it also influences our collective success and whether or not we ever get to that new idea or not. And so the goal in this section is of partnering for mutual benefit is really to move from conflict to collaboration. We often see that in so many organizations there is just so much conflict that is kind of under the surface there. And so, how do we kind of move through that to better collaboration by moving beyond just kind of these transactional interactions to really acknowledge the unique value that each person can contribute, and enabling everyone to get involved and to gain from the experience. We talk about in Lean that, it's and I love your tagline, Bruce, is, everybody every day. How do we get to everyone every day? And so that's really kind of what partnering for mutual benefit is about. So,
And I'm thinking, Scott, when we were at this point in the experience, this is where it all comes together. You've got the foundational skills and that you've just described in the first two behaviors, and now we're to this behavior, and we have a set of of collective and agreed upon language even and tools and techniques, but then you've set us up with a partner who
mhm,
who with the goal that we've set for ourselves and an ongoing partnership and collaboration and helping each other
yeah,
in a way that we had never done before as an organization.
yeah. Yeah, and that's all part of the design. So, the we started with engagement with compassion because it really builds some foundational elements that you need, and there's the three behaviors that we cover there. And then we moved into treating people like they matter. There's another set of foundational behaviors, and that really set us up nicely for this partner for mutual benefit, which is kind of really what we're trying to get to, that team, that real teamwork where we're collectively doing things not only for the customer's benefit, not only for the organization's benefit, not only for our own benefit, but for each other's benefit. And that's kind of really what we're focused on in this piece of it. So,
And it's a key element of why this is delivered with intact teams.
mhm,
You can do this individually, but that only goes so far. When you have coworkers that have been through the same experience, now it's really an exponential amount of improvement we can have in our relationships and, of course, in our business results.
yeah, and I think you said it. There's a shared lexicon that cuts across everyone who participates. So you've got this shared understanding, the shared experience, the shared collective knowledge that you can then almost tap into collectively as well. Yeah. Thank you, Melinda, for that.
If I could, real quick, Scott, you started with a clear reason for the word partner. And then we've ended up in the conversation and talking about benefit, right? In your last comments about benefit, that is a broader word than results for a customer, which is very important. But if you think about benefit throughout the organization, that's actually a key thought process that's embedded in all of the experience
Yeah,
that says, if we talk about making, having people like they matter, engage with compassion, those are all in the context of trying to learn about a broader perspective of the benefit of the activities that we're going through, right?
absolutely.
And so it helps, certainly, again, having been through the materials, it really helps to have a more encompassing perspective of what better is.
Hmm. Yeah. And that's you're kind of alluding to the last part of the program, which is we get to what we call the destination of better, and that's where we kind of start to wrap everything up. So I want to pivot to kind of what this is. It's really become a framework for culture change, and these principles and kind of the nine behaviors that fall under those principles are what led to kind of the creation of the Respect for People roadmap. And before I talk about culture change a little bit, I just want to open up the question one more time to the audience here. And so, what challenges are you facing with your current culture change method? So what challenges, whether it's culture change or just change efforts in general, maybe the behavior change methods that you're trying to use or the culture change methods or just the continuous improvement change. What, what are some of the things that you're struggling with? What are some of the challenges that you're seeing? You can drop those in the chat. Um, yeah, stuff gets lost in translation. As you're kind of going through the different levels, as kind of cascade that information. Um, Doubled your workforce. Yeah. And so bringing on a lot of new people who maybe aren't kind of completely aligned. Yeah, those habits that are already embedded in the culture that you need to kind of undo some of those habits, or even your systems that are hindering kind of progress. Um, yeah, the virtual element has certainly played a part in it as well, and making change a little more challenging. So great, yeah, lots of great things. Uh, yeah, the judgmental, the lack of consistency, all of those things. Yep, all of those things. So one of the things that we realized is that the current way that we typically tackle organizational change is to start at the top. Kind of makes sense. The most influential people start with those leaders. We might take them off site for a multi-day lecture style training. And what they end up taking away, they remember maybe 5 or 10% of that lecture. Then those leaders, they then come back to the business and they have to then personally internalize that content. They then have to model those behaviors, and then they have to figure out how to cascade it to everyone in the organization. So maybe what they do is they go to the next tier of managers, they share the 5 or 10% that they remember, give that to those managers. Those managers then remember 5% of that 5%. They have to then internalize it, model those behaviors, and then cascade that. That's just not scalable. It's just not effective. Um, and so we know that that method just doesn't work. So we really had to think kind of hard about what is a better way to do that. And and not just learning the concepts, but then also practicing kind of the things that they're learning as well. And so that's where we designed this Respect for People roadmap experience. And it was really to bring the Respect for People mindset and those principles to life so that we could address the gaps in this traditional culture change method that we have. And so the way it works is that participants embark on this road trip through the Respect for People landscape, and they're exploring the principles and the practice, and they're practicing the behaviors that kind of go along with each of those principles that lead to what we call the state of better, as kind of they've defined it. So at the very beginning of the program, the organization who's sponsoring this would kind of define what is better for them, but then every individual in the program at the very beginning of the program gets to define what better means for them personally. What would a better working experience be for them personally? And they carry that through the program. And at the very end, we kind of reflect back on that. And now that they've learned all of these tools, how can they use those tools to really positively affect that better that they kind of identified at the very beginning of the program? And so our approach to culture change really has a couple of different parts. One, we wanted it to be systematic versus ad hoc skill building. We wanted it to be based on the application of kind of standards. We wanted it to be informed by behavioral science and really built around a kind of a dynamic learning model. And to scale it, we knew that we had to make it a tool that could be flexible and scalable. And so we made it web-based. We have a web-based component to it. So I'll just touch on a couple of these, and I'll let Larry or Bruce or Melinda kind of jump in here. But our goal in that systematic change or that culture change, that culture change intervention that we were doing, was really designed to have a systematic focus where we were ingraining these new behaviors and mindsets across all levels of the organization. So the content was really written so that it was sophisticated enough for leaders, but accessible enough for frontline employees, so that everybody in the organization could take part in the experience. And so unlike some of the ad hoc skill building, which addresses kind of maybe those immediate needs, and there's nothing wrong with some of the, communication skills, conflict resolution. There's nothing wrong with all of those. We just wanted it to be systematic and interconnected. And so we pulled together all of these pieces so that we could create kind of a cohesive, sustainable shift in the organizational culture by really integrating continuous learning and development into really every practice. So that was one of the first pieces. Um, don't know if you guys want to share any thoughts on that, but kind of how we did that.
Well, my thoughts are actually you did it well. That's having been through the materials because there's a component of interaction, there's a component of reading, there's a component of audio visual things, and then talking with people, right? Which is the word internalization, I think, has come up more than once here. Uh,
Mhm.
and that's what I was thinking about as you were describing again. It does allow any of the participants, all the participants, to internalize not only the tools and mechanisms, but the thinking process that would allow you to use those tools and be comfortable trying some things. So, my response is to the way you did it is it's pretty good.
Thanks, Larry. Well, the second thing that we knew is, and I was drawing on kind of my operations experience. Standard work is a key element. And so to create a standard is kind of one of the things that we wanted to do so that it could be broken down into repeatable and reliable steps that could be consistently delivered to everybody in the organization. So creating this practical framework around the concepts means that every employee in every corner of the organization really essentially receives the same experience. And so the roadmap provides organizations kind of with a common path and a common language that can be reinforced, as kind of you pointed out earlier, Melinda, in the day-to-day experience. It's not just a leadership program, but it's designed for everybody in the organization. And so that was the second thing that was important. The third thing I think, which is something you were alluding to, Larry, here is that the roadmap creates kind of this holistic and blended learning experience by combining theoretical knowledge with practical applications, and really there's an interactive kind of engagement element too. It's really a comprehensive and engaging experience for the participants, which means that we have greater success embedding these behaviors into the day-to-day working experience. And so one of the things that we did is we tapped into a lot of the different learning methods. So we know that facilitated and structure-led teaching, most people will remember about 5% of that content. But if you stack on top of that some self-paced learning, then your retention goes up maybe another 5%. So you're at like 10%. If you add some audio-visual e-learning, then you add a little bit more of that understanding and retention. And if you can do some role plays or some demonstrations, then you're kind of adding a little bit more. That's all kind of passive learning. We also integrated some active learning elements. So there's peer learning and discussion groups, which I think you've referred to a few times, where you're actually interacting with others. There's exercises that you're doing with others, and when you do that, it just reinforces that content even more, and so your retention goes up even more. And then there's um, everything in the program is around learning, getting some feedback from a mentor, doing, and then getting some feedback. So there's this practice by doing that really enhances kind of the learning experience. So it's not just getting all the education, but it's also then starting to internalize it and then doing it and going out and actually practicing it. And then by the end of the program, there's an element of teaching others. So we ask you to take one thing that you've learned and share it with someone. And if you've ever had to teach something, the moment that you start prepping to teach something, you realize how much you really don't know about it. And so I think this is the kind of the stacked learning experience that we've kind of embedded into the whole program that you were kind of referring to, Larry. I don't know if Bruce, you want to share anything about your thoughts on that.
I just wanted to make sure I was not on mute. Yeah, I'm speaking now as a learner, and often say this to everyone that I meet that we learn things in little bits and pieces every day. We practice. We learn by doing, and we don't learn in batch, not generally. And that the best kind of learning is something where we have this kind of regular reinforcement and different methods, different touch points, ways of learning. So I'm experiencing that personally, and it definitely creating that daily cadence is different. It's different than, say, having a 2-day workshop and then having to
Mm.
kind of reflect and absorb all that and reprocess it. So the piece by piece, one by one learning, maybe we can call it, is I think is very very good concept.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and to that, I'll kind of share how it's the kind of the way it works is there's an online platform that connects the users to the content. It connects them to each other, and it also connects them to kind of their facilitator mentor. And so once the person logs in, the participant logs in, they can access the roadmap from really any smart device or computer. So it makes it really flexible. And they start going through the lessons, and each lesson is 5 to 15 minutes on average. And so they watch that video, they answer some questions. The answers to those questions goes to their facilitator mentor, who is then kind of has this exchange with them. And so it's really not only is it standardized, but it's also customized per participant because there's this custom element that's happening throughout the whole course of the program. I don't
Could
know,
I
Melissa,
add one
yeah, go ahead.
add one more piece to this? And again, from my personal experience, that there are odd times during the day when I have time to do this. Sometimes it's at 11 p.m. and sometimes at 6 a.m.
Mhm.
So it's the type of thing that doesn't require you to absolutely be there at a fixed time. It does require the cadence, but it doesn't specify the time. And that flexibility, I think, is important.
Yeah, yeah. So people can do it whenever they want. So yeah, great point. Melinda, do you want to share anything about the mentor element?
Yeah, so every online training that I've ever taken, it's about getting the right answer. Here, when you're paired with a mentor online, you're answering open-ended questions. There is no right answer, and that the responses are very personalized because they're for you. At the beginning, it feels a little unusual because most of us don't have the experience of having a one-on-one coach. This is a key element of the Toyota production system, but to actually have that resource available for you one-on-one as you're learning is quite a different experience. And so you engage with that individual, and over time, you let your guard down a little bit and
Mhm.
you start to have real conversations about what each of us need to do as leaders and as participants and as team members in order to apply what we're learning to our own work experience. And getting some immediate feedback from that is really powerful. It's a joy to be a coach in this program and to experience those connections that are building as the course evolves.
And and for many, especially frontline employees who go through the program, this is the first time they've had some kind of coach, and so it's a very unique experience. But as you mentioned, it's fairly standardized at Toyota, right? Like everybody has a mentor or coach, and so this is one way to kind of start introducing that idea into an organization. So, well, excellent. Well, should we open it up to questions?
I know Glade's been trying to get in here because I've seen a raised hand. I think I have to allow you to talk. Okay, go ahead, Glade. Oh, and you're on mute, so you'll have to unmute on your end. If anyone has a question, go ahead and put it into the Q&A or even in the chat. I'm watching both of those and we hear you. And Glade, I can't hear you. So will these slides be shared with this group, Scott?
Uh, yeah, that's up to you. These are your slides, so if you want to share them, then we can make a file that we can share out with people.
And we are recording this session and plan to share that as well. Other questions?
I did, while we're waiting for the next question, I did pop up some QR codes. So if you want to go to the website, there's a QR code for that, and that there's some more information on the website for it. The demo QR code is if you want to actually try out the roadmap, you can scan that. It'll take you to the platform. You just have to put your name, your email, and then create a password, and it brings you into the platform. That will allow you to try 8 of the 72 lessons. And I'll let you know that there's a little Easter egg at about stop 3 or 4. So make sure you get to at least stop with 3 or 4. There's a great little tool that we've created that you kind of get as a little bonus there. So,
And can we also mention, Scott, that we have a cohort starting on March
yes.
11th, and there we go. There's the sign up for that. We would welcome you there so that you can learn this firsthand. You might find that it's just what your organization needs and want to bring it to others.
So one of the questions, Melinda, was, is there a prerequisite for the course? There is no prerequisite in terms of learning. There is a little bit of setup that you want to do with kind of the leaders of the organization. There's just some information you need to know about kind of how to bring together a cohort. So there's a little bit of pre-work that whoever's sponsoring bringing this in for that team or for that organization or for that group, there's a little bit of pre-work that you want to do, and it's mostly just some conversations that we have to kind of level set expectations. So, but there's no pre-work for anybody to know anything. They can come in not knowing anything about lean or respect for people, and they can fully participate. So.
And maybe Scott also mentioning this does not need to be done at any specific time in your particular organization's implementation. In other words, this can be a precursor to your work, but
Yeah.
it also can be very helpful for organizations that are into the lean journey or have gotten some accomplishments under their belt, or perhaps you're learning the Shingo model and want to get deeper into the respect for people aspects. This would be an excellent complement to that journey.
I think the last thing that maybe we can mention is that there is, depending on where you are, there may be grants that are available to cover some of the cost of this as well. And if you're an HR professional and you need your recertification credits, you can get 40, it might be as much as 50 recertification credits from SHRM or HRCI. So.
And Cindy, we'll send out a summary message of what you've learned today and how to access everything that Scott has told you, as well as the recording.
Someone asked me to go back to the QR code for the demo.
Yes, we'll hope to see you there.
And I think you said, Melinda, that the recording will be available for people, right? You'll make that available somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
So could I wrap up a little bit, having been through the materials? Uh, this can be very effective for an organization or a team within an organization. So I'd encourage anybody, everybody that's on the webinar here to think about it in that context. But there's also a great deal of individual learning that's available. So even if it's not a circumstance where you have a team or your organization is going to sign up, certainly worth considering on an individual basis, because my personal experience is it will help with your relationships with your teams and throughout the organization. So I would encourage everybody that's attended to consider it a little bit more, both from an individual and a team perspective.
And I just dropped an answer in the chat. One of the questions was about the timing. So it's about 40 hours of total content that you do over somewhere between 10 to 20 weeks. We spread out the timeline because we really want people just doing a little bit every day. So 20, 30 minutes a day over the course of 10 to 20 weeks. And that timing is fluid just because it depends on how you want to schedule it. And so there's some flexibility on how to schedule it. And there are 6 sessions that are kind of live sessions. Those are pre-scheduled out. And so you pre-schedule those. That's where the whole cohort comes together for kind of that reflective conversation. Most of the rest of it is asynchronous. There are some exercises where you are partnered up with someone. You have to kind of set up a meeting to chat with that person and do one of the exercises kind of on your own. But there's about 6 sessions. Each of those are 90 minutes. Those are kind of preset at the very outset of the program, depending on kind of the duration. So, yeah. So Dan made a comment there. If you're thinking about changing culture, it's about a week's worth of work over the course of a couple of months to really create some of that culture transformation. So, yeah. Well, thank you. Guys, anything else you guys want to share? I know we're kind of at the top of our hour here, but
Thank you for joining us, Scott. It's
Yeah,
been
thank you so
wonderful.
much, Scott. Wonderful. Nice to have this presentation today. Thank you.
all right, thank you. I know there was one more comment. Any advice when needing to drive change when you have no direct influence as middle level leadership? The great thing about this is if you have a team, it doesn't matter where you are in the organization. You can do this with your team, and you will start to create kind of almost a little center of excellence for that team. And what we have seen in other organizations when that's happened, that starts to kind of bubble out. And so even if you can't influence the whole organization to do it, you could still do it with your team if if you work within a division, and you can't change the whole company, but if you have influence over that team and you can bring this to your team, it's still quite effective. So, all right.
Great.
All right.
Thank
I
you.
guess it's a wrap. Thank you very much. Thank you all for attending, and hope we'll see you at one of these workshops. Thank you.
I'm going to just pop up Jamie's contact info if someone needs to
There we
get
go.
in touch. So,
Yes, hoping to see you either in the demo or at our 311 on our March 11th cohort that's starting in a few weeks.
yeah, highly encourage people to do the demo. It gives you a really great example of it. So, all right. Well, everyone, have a great weekend.
Peace.
Bye, everyone.
All right, we're alone now.
All right. It looks like Glade is still there.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know how that happened. I was trying to reach out to Glade and
Are you still there,
Hey,
Glade?
yeah, sorry. I couldn't get on for a bit, and so I missed the front end, but what I caught was awesome, and I will sign off and let you debrief, but keep up the great work.
Glade, we did record Glade, so we'll make sure that we get that out to you.
I love it. Thank you, and
Thank you
happy
for joining us.
Friday, and keep up the great work.
All right.
Okay,
Have a good day.
bye-bye.